Hey everybody, Jeremy with Signs by Van. Today we're going to be talking about how to make sandblasted signs. Signs by Van's been making signs since 1981, and today we're going to share with you all of our secrets on how to make a beautiful sandblasted sign. The beautiful thing about sandblasting is it's not just for wood. With the right type of sandblast stencil, you can sandblast granite, high density urethane foam, wood, metals, all sorts of different types of mediums, and we're going to show you how to do that. So a big part of sandblasting is picking out the right type of material. Signs by Van prefers to use a western red cedar that's sourced locally here on the West Coast, and also a sequoia redwood. In most cases, you're going to want to look for vertical grain wood. What that basically means is when I hold this up, you're going to have a nice vertical grain so that when you sandblast, you have horizontal grain and it's consistent from top to bottom. The next most important thing is determining how big the sign's going to be and how many pieces of wood that you're going to have to put together in order to achieve the size that you're going for. With the sign behind me here, we put together 4 2x12, 11-foot long pieces of western red cedar, and we're going to get this thing ready to go with some stencil and get it out to the Sandblaster. It's now time to figure out how you're going to put those pieces of wood together so that when you sandblast, you'll have a nice consistent grain. You'll see here that we put these pieces together so that when you actually sandblast, you won't see the hard and soft grain differences. The next thing that you need to do is run it through a planer, and that's going to do a few different things for you. The first and foremost is it's going to take all of this real rough grain and top grain off of the piece of wood and smooth it out. The next thing you want to do is you want to regulate all of the different pieces that you're putting together to make sure that they all have the same thickness. A planer is going to do just that for you. We can't forget about the edge though, because we're going to be putting 2 pieces of wood together, and when you do that, you don't want to have that rough edge. The tighter the seam and the cleaner this edge is, the better hold you'll have when you glue these 2 pieces together. The machine that you do that on is called an edge planer, and we'll get that put on there and we'll show you how to do that. Next thing all we have to do is put the wood together.
The reason we love Hardco Sandblast stencil is it just has such a great adhesive on it. One of the worst things you can have happen when you're sandblasting a nice wooden sign like this is to have your stencil blow off in the process. We're going to peel this area right here so you can kind of see how it weeds out.
Once we have everything properly lined out, we put a hinge, basically, which is a fancy piece of tape that you can get just about at any hardware store. Flap it back, and then you'll take that plastic backing, peel it off. Once it's peeled off to the stage that it's in, that hinge keeps all of your stencil lined up. Lay it down. Another thing that you want to pay attention to when you're pulling backing off, the lower degree of angle that you peel it back with, rather than pulling it here, because you'll pull and you'll stretch. If you come down, also similar to how you would do vinyl, you'll actually come back and you actually see over here, kind of came up, so you'll just put a little bit more pressure, See how that alleviates and it won't pull up stuff. And then once you've got a pretty good anchor, you'll be able to kind of move to then flip over and be dead on a line when we go ahead and lay this down. When you have a really large piece of sandblast stencil, anything over 30 inches wide, you're going to have breaks in the material. It's just a part of making signs. So when you do have a break like that, i.e. what you're seeing right here on this eagle's head, you've got these little tiny splits. And if you don't cover them, you're going to have an issue with sand actually protruding, and you're going to have sand go in between those two pieces. So what we're essentially going to do is take an X-Acto knife, take some scrap Hardco Sandblast stencil, and we're just going to lay on top of this all the way over this seam, cut it, and it really doesn't matter where it's at as long as it stays within the outside line, and you're good to go. You're essentially doubling up over a seam, and that's going to prevent any type of sand intrusion. Science by Van likes to use a 250 CFM Solaire air compressor hooked up to a sandblast pot. The sand inside is a standard 30 grit sand that you could purchase at pretty much any local store. When we're outside, we want to make sure that we align the sign with the sun so that when we're actually blasting, we get to see the shadow, and what that basically does is shows us the depth. What you want to make sure you do when you're blasting a sign is make sure you have a consistent depth all the way through from top to bottom. What we want to do is bring the actual natural grain of the wood out of the sign. But also the main reason for sandblasting is it creates dimension and it also creates depth. There's lots of different ways to sandblast. Some people blast inside, some people blast outside like we like to do. People use automatic sandblasters or some do it by hand. There's no real right way to do it. It's whatever feels comfortable and whatever produces the best results for your specific company. Now there are a few really key variables you need to consider while you blast. First, you want to find the right distance. If you're too close, it's a lot easier to make mistakes, like blasting one part deeper than you intended. You can also overheat the board and the stencil, which might lead to problems when it's time to peel the stencil off. If you're too far away, it will take you forever to get the right depth, so you want to find the sweet spot. We stick to about 2 to 3 feet from the board. Second, you have to think about how fast you're moving your tool back and forth on the medium. Similar to distance, if you go too slow, it's much easier to accidentally blast one part deeper than you wanted and to overheat the stencil. But if you go too fast, you'll end up having to do way more passes back and forth than you really intended to. Going left to right, top to bottom will ensure that you have a consistent amount of passes and that you have an even depth cut all throughout your material. Adhesion is a really important part about choosing the right sandblast stencil for your project. If there's not enough grip or tackiness to the product, then it'll blow off during the sandblasting process. But you don't want to go with a true high grip on wood, or else it'll tear the wood up when you pull it off after blasting. Another main component of sandblasting is the blastability of the sandblasting stencil. If you choose a really good stencil, it'll be able to hold up to the rigorous beating that it gets from sand. The better a material defends that sand off the main part of the wood, the cleaner the edges that you're going to get through the sandblasting process. From start to finish, Hardco cuts better, it applies better, it sandblasts better, and it peels better than any other product on the market. Trust us, we've tried them all. Because it's vinyl, it's more durable than other stencils and can take a serious beating from the sandblaster without burning up the edges, giving us the real clean lines people love. We're finally ready to get the sign back to the shop and go through the process of peeling the Hardco sandblasting stencil off of the sign. When we do that, it's going to show the actual full grain of the wood, and we're really excited to see the results. You want to make sure that you keep a really low angle to the wood. Another really important fact about this is you want to make sure that you go with the grain.